Do you feel lost, like you've wandered into a dense, shadowed wood, unsure of the path forward? Do distractions pull you from the still, small voice, leaving your soul restless and searching? Have you felt the weight of silence and wondered if God has left you alone? Here on the Distracted Christian Podcast, we walk that dark night together. Every step draws us closer to the one who's been waiting. His love is the light that guides, His grace, the compass that never fails. They say the sky burned that night he was born. His mother whispered that it was the breath of the flame descending, marking him before he had even drawn his first breath. By the time he was 7, the boy had wandered alone into the sanctuary of flame. The priest who found him said that he was kneeling before the altar, whispering prayers no child should have known. He spoke of the 9 channels as though they had always pulsed through his own veins. When he was old enough to live under their care, he left his family behind and gave his days to the sanctuary's endless light. The priests took him in, and for a time he lived among them, quiet and watchful, learning the rhythms of their rituals. Years passed. When he was 13, he slipped into the temple after dusk, his hands raw from carrying buckets of water. The great chamber was empty, but for the low hum of the flame. From the shadowed doorway, a small, bent prophet stepped forward and asked what the boy heard when he prayed. "Colors deepen," the boy said. "The air gets thicker, like standing inside a song." And the prophet nodded slowly. "Good," he murmured. "Then you're not mistaking echoes for the voice." He laid his hand on the boy's crown, and warmth gathered there, soft and steady, like sunlight breaking through after shadow. "Son of dust and breath, child of the flame, you shall be a lamp in ruins and a cup in dry lands. You will stand where old song sings, ash will rise, but not own you. Be small to shelter many, brave to do good. Peace and quiet fire be yours." Confused, the boy stepped back. "Will I do great things?" the boy asked. "You will do good things," the prophet said, glad-eyed. "Sometimes the world will call them great, but don't learn the wrong lesson here." By 15, they called him the Starborn. It started one day. He touched a blind man and said, "In the flame, be healed." The man blinked at the sun and wept. And something broke open inside him too, as if the flame had poured into his chest and lit everything from within. Endowed with a golden tongue, he preached with a voice beyond his years. Farmers left their fields, merchants abandoned their stalls, crowds followed him barefoot and singing. They didn't come for the miracles alone, they came for the fire in his eyes. He wielded the channels, casting out sicknesses, prophesying events before they happened. When a child drowned in the river, he held the body and whispered, "Live," and the boy gasped awake. The people dropped to their knees, and he didn't stop them. He told himself, well, this isn't pride. That it was joy, reverence. But he had come to crave the way they looked at him. On the roads, children pointed to him, elders bowed, strangers knelt. Every night he prayed with his arms raised, heart burning. The voice would come like thunder, and he obeyed without hesitation and without doubt. He became a vessel for the flame. He fasted until he shook, slept little, prayed long. He believed that this was what saints did, burn until only the flame remained. But beneath the visions and the hymns, he longed to be seen. And just before his 21st year, the old prophet returned. He looked even smaller now, eyes dim but alert. "You've tasted glory," the old man said. Starborn replied, "The flame spreads its own glory." But the prophet didn't smile. "Yes, but not through you much longer." "What do you mean?" And the prophet's eyes rolled back, and his voice rang out. "There will come a day when your voice will cry out, and none will answer, when your hands will reach forth, and nothing will rise. The heavens will give you no sign, and this silence will break you. The starborn said nothing. He turned toward the sanctuary. The fire still answered him. The vision still came. The people still gathered. And what need had he for these warnings? He believed holiness was power, that surrender meant signs, that he was being poured out for the heavens. Then came the day he felt off. His morning prayer met only silence. That afternoon's healing came slower, heavier. The crowd fidgeted through his sermon, and he forced a smile. It's only one quiet day, he said. But the silence didn't leave. A week passed with no dreams. A month without miracles. And he told himself it was a pruning. He's making room for more, he told a friend. Stillness is holy, too. He prayed louder, fasted harder, confessed everything. He withdrew, but the voice did not return, and the presence grew faint. And then it vanished. Not in anger, but it was just simply gone. The day came when he left the temple without a word to take work in a small town. The villagers called him the quiet one now. They let him stay in a small hut on the edge of the road, and the seasons began to turn. His beard thickened, his voice, when he used it, grew hoarse. He stopped repeating the old prayers. He never told anyone who he used to be. But every morning, before he picked up his tools, he paused just outside the door, just long enough to hear the silence yet again. Then one winter came, and refugees started arriving in clusters. The clothes were heavy with the scent of soot. They carried stories with them, and rumors whispered of dying fires. They said since the starborn had left the sanctum, the world itself had begun to wilt. The rivers to the east were drying. Trees no longer bloomed along the old salt road. Dust now fell where rain once did. In the market, men spoke in low voices of the Ash King, and how he summoned rain in the barren fields and fire in the ruins. One swore that he wore a crown of coal. Another claimed that he drank from the flame itself. They said the Ash King had crossed the Lahar Wastes, come to rekindle the fire that the Starborn had lost. Welcome back to the Distracted Christian Podcast. I'm your host, Nate Labradorf. And the silence that settled over Starborn was not the end of his gifts. We'll find out more of that later. It really was the start of the flame's most deeper work. And in real life, most of us miss that. When silence settles in from God, we think something broke, when it may be just God had stopped letting me live off the shine of my life. And that is the ground that St. John of the Cross describes. God takes someone who has truly tasted of him, and, quite on purpose and with love, he removes that taste. And now we start what is Book 2 of The Dark Night of the Soul by St. John of the Cross. And this is really the turning point. The soul moves from the early brightness of seeking God into a darker and truer cleansing. There's some same patterns, but there are fewer miracles, more truth. So let's walk this path together. St. John does not start his second book with thunder. He starts with something more unsettling, the stillness after the brightness. The soul, he says, is not thrown from the first cleansing into deep darkness. God is gentler and more exact than that. He lets the soul taste for what it asks for. There is more freedom from old attachments. Prayer feels simpler. There's a quiet sweetness. Then, when the soul starts to breathe easier, God begins to darken the air again. And this is chapters 1 and 2 of the second book of The Dark Night of the Soul. And this is the shift. First comes relief in the lightness. Then slowly a heavier season arrives and does not lift. The stakes are huge. This is the difference between a soul that enjoys God and a soul that belongs to him fully. After the night of sense, that's book 1, the soul is like someone stepping out of a cramped cell into the open air. She moves freely. Prayer no longer feels like pushing a boulder uphill. The mind grows quiet without force. Loving attention to God seems to rise on its own, like light entering a room when the shutters are open. She sits down to pray and finds not a strain, not dryness, not forced images, but a gentle settling into God. Even the body can feel this sweetness. She leaves prayer softened as if her whole self remembers being visited. And St. John calls this kind of spiritualness adolescence. The soul is not a child anymore. She has moved beyond past loud comforts and obvious temptations. She is steadier, more eager, and more at home with God and the things of God. But adolescence is still something between, stronger than childhood, but not yet mature. The soul is blooming, but not firm. Her love is real and warmer than before, but it is still mixed in ways that he or she cannot see. Because we are one person, body and soul woven together, trouble in the spirit eventually pulls on the senses. So even in the bright season, the soul begins to feel the flash of another climate. She feels sudden darkness, confusion where there is no clear cause, and the dryness that cuts deeper than before. St. John is careful here, though. These are not the long, dull, dry spells of the first night. These are shorter drops, more intense, like sudden storms. He says they come as warnings. They announce that a deeper night exists, and that for some souls, God will open the door to it. For others, the night will come and go in brief visits. These short, purifying touches cleanse enough for the love of God that he intends. But for those God wills to join himself into high union, the pattern changes. The back and forth stops. The sun sets and does not rise quickly. Then begins the dark night of the spirit. And why must God do this? Because the first cleansing, even if it is felt strong, did not reach the deepest part of a person. It trimmed the branches, but did not pull the root. The soul came out with fewer entanglements and simpler prayer, but the spirit, the inner center of the self, hidden fears, old strains, and subtle prides, cannot live. This is mainly untouched. Since the person is one, the impurity of the spirit will sooner or later disturb the peace of the senses. God allows these sharp storms to show the soul that you are not as clean as you feel. Now, chapter 2 of book 2 makes his point even clearer. St. John says advanced souls carry two kinds of problems: habitual imperfections and actual imperfections. Habitual imperfections are old and quiet. They are not the loud sins. They are not even chosen on purpose many times. They are like sediment. They are deep habits of thinking and wanting that sin has thickened over time. The first nine did not remove them because it focused mostly on calming the senses. But these stains remain in the spirit like old wine and cloth. Water will not lift them. They need a harsh washing. St. John uses strong images. It is the difference between cutting a branch and pulling out the root, between wiping a fresh stain and scrubbing a set one. You can feel the resistance in those pictures. These habits are dangerous because the soul often cannot see them. She thinks she's doing well, and in many ways she is. She prays with sweetness. She loves God. She is not living in serious sin. Others may even admire her devotion, but grace does not aim for a house that is good enough. It aims for a house that is fit for God. God will not join himself fully to a spirit that is holding, even faintly, to self-love, hidden vanity, or the old roughness of Adam, according to St. John. So he darkens and purifies. Now, the other category of sin, actual imperfections, are more dramatic. Because these souls are advanced, God may grant them many spiritual experiences. They may receive inner words, strong feelings, bright images in prayer, and sometimes visions. These can be real graces, but St. John warns that they can also be risky. The senses are more refined now and can taste spiritual delight, but they are still senses. They are weak and limited. So the body can strain under the weight, and a person may feel shaken, exhausted, and even overwhelmed. Trances and strong reactions can happen, not because God is putting on a show, but because the experience is still mixed with the body's limits. The soul can mistake these signs for high holiness. She begins, without knowing it, to trust sweetness more than faith. And once sweetness becomes the guide, another voice can enter. St. John is blunt. In this state, the devil can mimic light impressed on the imagination. He can suggest messages that sound holy, a soul that assumes every inner moment is from God and that her experiences mark her as special. That person becomes easily fooled. Here, the hidden enemy shows itself spiritual pride. Not the loud pride of money and applause, but a cleaner pride looking dressed up in piety. The soul may start to believe she is favored. She may enjoy being known as someone special with special experiences. Holy fear, the careful tenderness that guards virtue, grows thin, and she becomes bold, not in a good way, with God. And St. John warns that if this goes on, some souls do not return to the straight road. Deceptions can harden habit. A person can live a religious life inside illusions, mistakenly feeling that the bright sounds and lights are from God Himself. And that is why the night of the Spirit is necessary. It is not a luxury. It is not. It is not easy. It is the safe path for the soul that God intends to finish. Now, what will this night do? It will do what the soul will not do on her own. It will shut down the sources of pleasure, even spiritual pleasure. It will force the faculties to walk in darkness. It will strip both sense and spirit of pleasant supports that they have come to expect. It will push the soul into faith alone. Faith is dark because it is not felt. It is a pure substance because it is not dependent on taste. It is the only fitting way to unite with the invisible God. In other words, God protects the soul from her own shining by giving her hiddenness. So, chapters 1 and 2 are like standing on the edge of a dark forest. Behind you is an open field that you have already crossed. You know what dryness is. You know what it is to lose comforts. You also know the wide air of spiritual growth. But ahead is a deeper darkness with no clear path and no quick relief. St. John explains why God leads the soul there. Her roots still reach back into herself. Her senses, though cleaner, are still mixed with what should be God's work alone. The enemy can still copy consolations, and love wants to meet her not in the colored lights of gifts, but in the clear dark of God Himself. The night of the Spirit is not God's anger, it is His exact tenderness. He sees what the soul cannot feel. He will not stop until she is ready to receive Him. Let us now turn to Scripture, to the prophets, the wilderness, Psalms of desolation, the marriage language in Hosea especially, and even the Passion of Christ all show what this night accomplishes. Where does God dim human lights in order to give His own? Where does He remove sweetness so that our love can become pure? And these passages that we're going to explore explain this from St. John of the Cross. They show that the night he describes as the night the Scripture already knows. The first text that came to my mind was Hosea 2:14 through 20. God says He will lead His unfaithful bride into the wilderness, speak to her heart, remove the names of the other lovers, and then join her to Himself in faith, so that she will know the Lord. It is not a soft romance, it is severe tenderness. It follows the same movement: comfort, exposure, loss, and then deeper union. Therefore, behold, I will allure her, and bring her into the wilderness, and speak tenderly to her. Now, that word, therefore, matters. The bride chased other lovers for bread and water. She was not starving, though. She was surrounded by gifts: grain, oil, wine, silver. She confused gifts with the givers, and so God brings her into a place where no false voice speaks. The cure is not more gifts, it is an emptied landscape. The wilderness is where the extra voices fall silent, and the soul is alone with God. After the night of sense, as St. John writes, the soul enjoys new freedom and sweetness. It is good, but it can become a trap. The soul can begin to lean on the experience itself. So God leads her out again into a place where she cannot live on taste. And there I will speak to her heart, is what God says in Hosea. Notice that order: wilderness first, tender speech second. Tenderness lands when rival sounds are gone. In the language of the dark night, the spirit must be stripped of mixed support so God can communicate himself more purely. Hosea also shows the rhythm of loss and return. God speaks of giving vineyards again and turning the valley of trouble into a door of hope. Trouble becomes an entry. What feels like inward distress can become a doorway into deeper love. Then comes the key line. In that day, says the Lord, you will call me my husband, and you will no longer call me my Baal. The bride's language is purified. Baal carries the sense of master. Husband is covenant and shared life. One root, St. John points out, is our tendency to treat God like someone that it needs to be impressed, to be bargained with, or to display something to. In the night, God removes what feeds that. He removes the sweetness that can grow pride, and he teaches the soul to say, husband, not master. Also, Hosea adds, for I will remove the names of the Baals from her mouth. God does not only tell her to stop, he takes the names away. That is what the dark night does. It reaches a place in the soul that it cannot reach by its own effort and burns out all those old reflexes. Then the promise, I will betroth you to me forever. I will betroth you to me in faith, and you shall know the Lord. Betrothal means a stable and exclusive union. And that means name is faith. Faith is dark and pure. It does not lean on feelings or images, on logic and concise definitions. It fits union with the unseen God. And that order matters. Exposure of the false lovers, the wilderness, tender speech, removal of these rival names, betrothal in faith, and then knowing. We want to reverse that order. We want to feel close first and purified later. God loves us too much to accept that. He leads through the hard sequence that will end in real intimacy. And so Hosea is not just compatible with St. John, it shows the same kind of pattern. Wilderness is the deeper night. The removed names match the cleansing of the deep habits. The danger of confusing gifts with lovers matches the danger of trusting experiences. Betrothal in faith matches why God dims even spiritual sweetness. The whole passage moves from mixed love to pure love. Now, if God is doing that within us, there will be signs in our prayers and our desires and our hidden loves. And naming those signs and responding with humility is where we can begin to apply these truths to our lives. So, St. John says the danger for the proficient is not gross sin. It is subtle clinging to spiritual delight, to inner messages, to the feeling that God is near. The soul has come from far. Prayer flows. God often feels close. That is the moment, St. John says, the soul is most at risk of being charmed and beguiled, not by the world, but by holy-looking things. Here is one practice that fits his teaching. When you receive this spiritual sweetness, maybe an inner word, a vision, or an uplifting feeling, don't rest in it. Turn instead to simple faith. Not because the sweetness is bad, but because attachment to it is bad. This is the move St. John wants. The soul learns to walk without leaning on taste. The refusal is not contempt, it is detachment. It is the soul saying, I received this gift, but I will not make it my God. And here's how you can do it. Notice it in your body. When you are praying and warmth rises or peace begins to bloom, or the mind brightens, name it. Recognize that this is a spiritual delight that is touching my senses. Don't fear it, receive it, and see it, though. Now, when that happens, remind yourself of the risk. Anything that leans on sense is still mixed. It may be good, but it is not God as He is. This will keep you sober. 3. Make a quiet refusal. Without changing posture, say to the Lord, thank you, but I will not cling to this. I choose you in faith and not distaste. Let the sweetness pass through you. Don't grab it and hold on to it. Don't store it up for later. Do not use it as proof that you're advancing. 4. Turn to faith. After the refusal, stay with God in something plainer. Faith feels like night because it does not feed the senses. Remain there a moment, tasting nothing, only consenting. You are practicing now what God may later ask of you in a deeper way. This matters because St. John is not mainly teaching us how to survive dryness. He's teaching us how God uproots roots that do not look like roots. Beginners cling to obvious things. The first night trims the obvious. Proficients can cling to spiritual gifts, though. The deeper night burns those out, the clinging. The gifts may still be there, but it burns that clinging away. And if you begin to release them now, you agree with God's work before the heavier medicine arrives. This also protects you from deception. St. John warns that the enemy can suggest feelings and visions at this stage. If you always prefer faith to sensation, those tricks lose their power. The enemy cannot feed your vanity with experiences you refuse to hold. And over time, this will make you simpler inside, not empty, but clear. Prayer will have fewer inner fireworks. You will feel less need to tell others what you received. Holy fear returns because you stop being bold with God. And if God lead you into a fuller night where sweetness is gone altogether, your soul will recognize the place. It will feel like a path you have already chosen to walk many, many times. So the practice is simple. It may be hidden, and it's hard. Each time grace touches your senses, let it go and choose faith. Do it quietly. No one needs to know. This is how a soul is washed deep, not just wiped clean. This is how a soul becomes ready for union through faith in the dark with empty hands. That's where we'll end for today. Thank you for spending this time with me on the Distracted Christian Podcast. I know you could have filled this hour with anything, so the fact that you sit here with me in St. John of the Cross is beautiful. And with this strange idea that God is loving you through the dryness, and it really matters. Thanks to Anton Koryakov for the theme music. He is the reason this sounds calmer and wiser than I actually am. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts, follow and subscribe so that you don't miss the next episode. And if this helped you, leave a rating or share it with someone who is wondering why God feels quieter right now. For show notes, more reflections, other theological rabbit holes, head over to freshgroundtheology.com. That's where we keep the extras. I'm Nate Labradorf. Thank you for listening. Stay faithful in the quiet, and I'll see you next time. Special thanks to Anton Koryakov for today's theme music on the show. Tune in to hear more next time. Thanks for listening.